Welcome to Packmates, a podcast about Magic the Gathering Limited. Today we're going to talk about the Golgari Guild, in which uncommons and commons, I think, go best with Golgari. Golgari is green-black, and let's get into the signposts. First signpost we have is Insidious Roots. This is a signpost that tells you exactly what green-black wants to do. It wants to take creatures out of your graveyard. In order to do that, we're going to have to put creatures in our graveyard. The other signpost is Cruel Whipcracker. It's just a solid creature that destroys a token on ETB. This deck could be fun, but it also will be very hard to build and even harder in sealed, so keep that in mind when you're trying to build this deck. The first card we have is Flotsam and Jetsam. We're going to want to likely cast this for the Flotsam side. It puts an 8 CMC card into our graveyard that we can collect evidence on. Then we have Soul Innervation and Chalk Outline. Having multiple of these enchantments will likely win us the game, but we can't have too many, because if we have too many in our deck, we won't be able to get creatures into our graveyard or out of our graveyard. Aftermath Analyst allows us to mill 3 cards. It puts itself in its graveyard, and it blocks really well as a 1/3 for 2. It will also give us some value in the late game if we return our lands to the battlefield that we've milled throughout the game. Hedge Whisperer, Sample Collector, and Polygraph Orb all let us repeatedly collect evidence, which is a good way we can get creatures out of our graveyard. It's not necessarily the best way, but it is a good way. Fester Leech repeatedly mills us, which is something that we're super interested in. I do think it will be one of the best black uncommons in the format, considering it can be a 3/3 for 1 mana. And that's very good in this format because there will be a lot of 2/2s running around. Next up, we have some solid removal spells in Long Goodbye and Hard-Hitting Question. Leering Onlooker is a solid 2-drop that will do the work himself and remove himself from our graveyard to provide value with our enchantments. A Killer Among Us is a decent spell after we spend turn 4 casting a big enchantment that kind of does nothing to put 3 creature tokens on the board and help us stabilize, and then we can sack it to get more collect evidence triggers when it's in the graveyard. So next up we have Rubble Belt Maverick and Gravestone Strider. They're kind of the same idea as the 1/3 flyer. They do all the work for us, and Rubble Belt Maverick even lets us put some cards in the graveyard to collect evidence. Slime Against Humanity is a creature that, as a sorcery, goes straight to the graveyard for us to collect evidence on later. Topiary Panther is kind of the same deal. We can just basically land cycle it to hit our lands and get a creature in our graveyard that we can later exile. I do think Gravestone Strider will be very good in our deck because we pay 2 to exile this and another creature in our graveyard, giving us 2 triggers off of our powerful enchantments that we're building the entire deck around. Next up, we have Basilica Stalker. That's a great disguise creature that we can trade off early to get some creatures in our graveyard. Rot Farm Mortipede will keep us in the game with lifelink. Snarling Gorehound will be very good 1-drop because when we put our other things in the battlefield, we can surveil one and pitch cards we don't really need. Toxin Analysis is another card that will just keep us in the game because it has lifelink and it trades up well and it investigates. Next up, we have a pretty good removal suite. Slice from the Shadows and Murder are very fine cards. Extract a Confession and Bite Down on Crime use collect evidence as upside for our deck and are very good when we can collect evidence on them. Extract a Confession will both be good in the early and late game, so keep that in mind. Next up, we have our multicolored disguise creatures that I think will go good in this deck. Undercover Crocodile and Fairy Snoop will be best because they're both 3 and 6 converted mana costs, and that's very good when we collect evidence. A lot of the collect evidence thresholds are there. There are some at 4 as well. Riftburst Hellion is just going to be a solid big body in the late game if we need it. I'm not super high on playing it, but we can in this deck. I'm very much looking forward to the puzzle that is this archetype of getting creatures out of your graveyard. I do think that it's going to be a tough build. I think that having too many payoffs will be bad, having too much removal will be bad, not have enough creatures or creatures that take themselves out of the graveyard is going to be tough to get. I think this deck's going to be very hard to build, but I do think the payoff is that we win the game if it goes late every time, and I think that's worthwhile. This has been the Golgari Limited Review. If you think I left any cards out, please let me know. And don't forget to subscribe and check out the Discord. See you guys later.